Can you believe that she kept that microphone and did not give it to the next person? Oh my goodness. You know, and Alejandro here, he never, ever shows up to work on time. And that HR department, they don't know anything, ever. In accounting, let me tell you, accounting is awful. Here's the deal. Every complaint is just a poorly worded request. So what is it that we're really asking for underneath every complaint that we hear? So hey, HR, what are we listening for? And are we going to jump on the complaint wagon, or are we going to start to decipher those complaints into requests? I know you're probably sitting there going, really? You want us to really listen into the request underneath the complaint? Yes. And here is how we're going to do that. So we have 4 steps to really doing that, is from taking those complaints into requests, or bitching into pitching, whatever way you would like to look at that. And those 4 are thoughts, curiosity, conversation, and then the request. So with that, what is the thought that the complainer or the bitcher has about the person that they're complaining about? So if we think about that, and we're complaining about Alejandro that never shows up for work, what is it that I'm really asking? I'm really saying, I need somebody that's reliable. So what is my request? For him to show up on time. So again, when we start to look at every complaint as being that poorly worded request, we can do this with our kids. Oh, that's really fun. We can do this with our boss. That's even more fun. We can do this with the HR department. And so with that, it's kind of like going back to school. We have to relearn how we think about things and what those unintentional thoughts are that are in our head. Because guess what? It is so much easier to complain than it is to actually make a request. Because we don't really have to think when we complain. It's natural to us. We do have to think when we make a request. So the first step is the thought. What thought do I have about this person specifically? And we're in HR, so we know that there's biases in every single thing we do. And so with that, those biases will start to impact. So this is Kira. Oh my gosh, Kira is on her phone again, and she is not working. This is Kira. Kira's doing our social media, and isn't she amazing? Guess what? The bias I have based on the thought is going to impact how I'm going to think about that. So now I need to look at curiosity. So when we're talking with our managers and really being curious about what is underneath that complaint. Oh my gosh, Kira is on her phone again. All right, what's under this? What are you frustrated about with Kira? Well, guess what? I'm frustrated because she never gets her stuff done on time. So now we get to play the Rubik's Cube. We get to play the fun little game, right? So what is underneath the complaint? And what is it that we really need that we're complaining about? And so that's where the curiosity comes in. And as leaders now, we've figured out, hey, what are they complaining about? What is underneath it with the curiosity? Now we get to have the conversation. Can you tell me more about the phone? Can you tell me more about the not meeting the deadline? Can you tell me more about what's going on with that? Because when we get curious, we don't jump on the complaint bandwagon to play whack-a-mole on everybody else, because that's super easy to do. We've all done that, right? We get to be those problem solvers and really solve that problem as to what is this complaint really about, so that we can start to engage our folks. And that's when we start to figure out what the request is. And a lot of times we're rephrasing what we're hearing based on our questions of the complaint. So really what I hear you saying is that you need the social media stuff out by this time. I just counted to 5 in a 15-second slide. Was that hard for anyone? And the reason why I do that is when we stop and listen, we're holding space and we're giving individuals the opportunity to start to tell us what things are. Because this is the moment where we start to have those conversations and have them tell us what the resolution is versus us telling them. And what that does is that starts to build trust. And when we build trust with our team, oh, there it goes. And when we build trust with our team, guess what that does to our culture? That increases the culture. That also increases the engagement of our team, because we're no longer telling and jumping on the bitching bandwagon. No one ever does that in HR, right? So what we're doing is we're creating a culture and I'll say with love, like we're creating that loving culture because we're holding space and really seeing people as people and figuring out what's underneath it so we can get to resolve that key complaint that they have by having them rephrase that into a request. So again, every complaint is just a poorly worded request. And the steps to do that are to understand what's our bias around that, or what is their bias around that. Getting curious around what is underneath that complaint, what is true, because so often the complaints are laced in stories and very little fact. So with that, as you go back to the office, I want you to think, are you bitching or are you pitching into what the individual really needs to create the request so that they have their problem solved? Thank you.